Welcome to the Crypto Rain channel. I'm your host Jay Rain, and we have one of our favorite days during the week where we have some fundamental analysis mixed with some technical analysis, or better said, price analysis, with our resident expert Paul from Definity, who's joining us all the way from the UK, and he's sharing with us his thoughts. And what better week to have Paul join us, because if you've been in crypto and you're invested in crypto, it does feel like a knife in the heart, or better said, it feels like a brick got thrown at your head and hit, doesn't it? And that's part of being in crypto. Now, some people choose to leave because it's rough being here. It hurts. Why? Because we're emotional creatures. It shouldn't hurt, but it does. So the money to be made, though, is being here and making pretty good decisions, because it's impossible to make all perfect decisions, but just making some pretty good decisions over time can have really good results over time. So why don't we go ahead and take a second and welcome our guest, Paul from Definity. Paul, thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Always love talking to you, and thanks for all your suggestions as to what we should look at. They look really exciting.
Yeah, so these ones come from the audience. Now, if you're in the audience and you're looking at, you want us to review some of your projects, or up to 2 suggestions that you have next week, if you put them in the comments section below, we will include them. Unless they're like a meme coin or something super scammy about them, then we'll probably nix it all together. But given the time, we will go through, because all the ones we'll be looking at today are your suggestions, plus possibly a few that we want to look at. But why don't we get right into it and start looking? Well, before we get into looking at the charts, I mean, we just had a big shakeup. A lot of longs liquidated. Love your thoughts on what's going on, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to look at it is to actually just get a chart up, and I'll show you. I think we were talking about the 54,000 level in Bitcoin last week, and I was saying that I didn't like the way the market was trading in a range, and so I just got to move this out of the way. So Bitcoin was trading much weaker than Ethereum, but not enough to suggest that it was going to drop like this. So I wasn't expecting a big drop, although I did think that there were lots of stops to be hit below this 54,000 level. Now, does it mean the market's going to go to 42? I didn't think that, but you can never say never with the markets. That is the problem, especially this one. But I think it's really important to put this into long-term context. There are weaker hands that'll be shaken out of this. Like, people who've just bought at the high, just got really excited, and they will be shaken out in this move. But whilst it's going to be volatile in the short term, longer term, this will settle down, and then we'll see where it really wants to go, which might be lower. And if it is, I think there'll be some really great buying opportunities coming up. So it's one of those things where we've just got to sort of remain calm, see where the price action goes, see when it starts to settle. I mean, it's already done what's called a major spike. Now, a spike is when the market basically gets overdone either on the upside or the downside. So this goes like a rubber band and sort of pings down and then bounces all the way up. That's a big move. So that's a really big bounce. So if you think about it, somebody was buying really hard on this pullback, and it's pushing it back up again. So this is the line I put in to say it needs to cross this resistance line now for me before I can start talking about a bull move. And 54,000, when we were below it, again, that was if it crosses this looks really good, we should be in a nice upward trend. So now we're below it again, that's the barrier. So 54,000 is the barrier, and this resistance line before I can get really excited again about a bull move in Bitcoin. And it will come at some point in the future. It might not be this month, might not even be next month, but it will be in the future. We'll see a really strong, screaming bull market. And that's when the market is much simpler and easier to trade. Right now, it's really tricky. You've got to have a lot of conviction on your pullback. And so if you look at Ethereum and say, have a look at what happened from last week to this week, yeah, there's been some big moves, but we're pretty much back in the range. So isn't that strange? If you hadn't seen this move down or known that it happened, you wouldn't think that anything was really going on. So that's very strange. And I think we talked about how it's broken the high and broken the low before that. So it was doing some weird things. But it's back in that range. So I've got to say, I'm not sure where it's going next, because anything that's that volatile is going to be hard to predict. We need to let it settle down. We need to let the volatility settle down. But it's encouraging that it's still looking more bullish than Bitcoin. And the spread chart, which again, I did talk about, I said would break through the high, has done that, and it's looking like it's going to go much higher. So this is a better looking chart in terms of price action, but this is something we've been expecting for some time. Now, I mentioned that perhaps both could be going down and the spread could still move up, but either way, the spread between Ethereum and Bitcoin looks like it's going to go much higher from here. Now, whether that means that there'll be a bull market, I'm not sure. I can't say that as yet, but it does look like this has moved through. Well, it doesn't look like it has moved through a really important resistance line, which should see this accelerate. So Ethereum is still the favored technology out of the two, but overall, the market's still, as far as Ethereum goes, is still in this range. Now, MATIC, very quickly, was one that I pointed out as well from last week. It was breaking the top of a resistance line. The big retracement pushed it back into the bottom end of that line, which I wouldn't want to have seen. I would like to have just gone straight up rather than hang around. But you see, the quality comes back very quickly. The market has bounced and it's now moving higher again. So it should really go for this resistance up at 289 and maybe beyond. So as I said, there's no guarantee that it will, but it's standing out in what is quite a nervous and a fairly weak market in some areas, but fairly strong in others. So it's back to being careful as to what we pick. But I think overall the sector will recover, and we'll see some great opportunities.
Yeah, it's like really what kicked it off was Jerome Powell said some things at the Fed which spooked the heck out of the equities market or the stock market. And what's funny is how correlated the stock market is. When a lot of big funds are liquidating, they liquidate to cash, both in stocks, but also in crypto, and that drops the market. So we even saw MATIC drop substantially, but then it bounced right back up because it should have been taking off. ETH should have been taking off more, so they were a lot less affected than most other things, because a lot of people bought really quickly the dip on those because the charts had been screaming they're ready for a takeoff. That's my guess. Yeah. And that's how it played out according to me. I know D had picked up some MATIC after last week's episode. Note, by the way, to everyone in the audience, this isn't financial advice. We're investors ourselves sharing what we think, but we're definitely not financial advisors, and we don't try to be. So we do give our thoughts on this, which really at the end of the day, do your own research and buy what you like, because you're the one that gets to live with the decisions that you make.
Well, that's absolutely true. Because at the end of the day, you also don't know what risk profiles there are for people, how long they want to hold the asset for, whether they want to get in and out. And the only way to know that is to have a very long conversation with them. And in the end, every good trader I know does it for themselves. They make their own decisions and they live with their own decisions. So it's good to see what other people think, but it's really great to know that you have your own plan and your own views. And that's what I like about sharing views with other people. You can test whether your ideas may be right or may be wrong. It's also why I like to hear ideas that aren't necessarily the same as mine, which is why I love Crypto Rain's views. When the markets are going down, he gets excited about that, whereas I get a little bit more cautious about that, because I think, well, what if this turns into a really big bear trend and it's going to go on for a long time? But if you're confident in the technology, then that means you can confidently buy. But if you're looking for a longer term.
Yeah, and at some point I will be as cautious as you when it's looking bearish, because I do think we'll hit another bear market. I just think it's not yet, and I think we're going to have a blow off top this next year or this spring, and it's going to be crazy. Yeah. With that said, let's take a look at some of these altcoins that have come from suggestions from the audience.
Yes, indeed. And just I second that view. I think we're heading to a massive inflationary boom. We're going to see some really interesting moves that will make these corrections look like just little blips. But the first one is CyberFi. If I've got the codes right, because I get the codes and I put the charts up, so if I've got it wrong, I'm sure I'll be kept honest by Crypto Rain. So this is an interesting chart, which I feel either we've looked at before, or it just looks really similar to something. But this trend, this downward trend, is over, and we can see that this is really good analysis in terms of how markets trade, because you've got this really obvious upward trend, a downward trend that mirrors it. So you see the rate is exactly the same, and then we've been bumping along in this really tidy little range. So ultimately we need to see which way it's going to break out. And we know that the big picture has been nervous. We know the big picture has seen a lot of selling and selling of everything, but this has managed to hold into really good support, which is around 672. So that low around 672 I wouldn't want to break, because then it would just drop it to another shelf low. But for now it's holding above and it's holding in a range. But for this to turn bullish, we need this resistance to go at 1234. It's failed there not once or twice, but quite a few times here. It's looked like that was a real important level to somebody to get rid of some. And it's tried to break over it and failed. Now we've got a spike up here, which I don't know whether that's real price action or not, but it doesn't look like it's stuck there anyway. So it looks a bit strange. Maybe it's a wrong price or something. But even if it was traded there, it didn't hold above that resistance, which is what we want. So for the moment, I'd say that that is range bound, but it will look much more interesting. Short-term players would like to buy it and sell it in the range. They'll play what's called the RSI, which is the relative strength index, which is something that works as a technical signal in ranges. But I'm waiting for a nice trend for this, and it needs to take the high before I can get excited about it.
Yeah, agreed. And CyberFi is a launchpad project, and in that chart, we saw a huge takeoff in spring, and the reason is when we go through a bull trend, and in the spring we had a sizable bull trend. Launchpad projects do really, really well because a lot of the new projects are launching through them. In order to get things at IDO price, you have to hold their tokens. And so when things pulled back in the summer, and since then, a lot of those tokens have been down, but as we head into the hot season, a lot of these launchpad tokens will take off. Now, there are a lot more launchpads out there, but when Bitcoin hits over 100,000, I think there's going to be a lot of FOMO coming into the market from people that have been sitting on the sidelines, because I know a few millionaires that keep telling me, oh, you have to help me buy Bitcoin, and I talk to them about it, but I'm not going to chase them down and show them how to get an account or anything. I'll give them little tips. I remember when I was new, I helped a lot of people do that, and it's really frustrating because they don't go out and get the knowledge themselves. And so he hasn't bought any, but I'm sure once it crosses 100,000, then he'll be like, oh my gosh, I need to buy some. And that's not necessarily, that's not a terrible time to be buying. It's a lot better than 180,000 or 200,000 or 300,000. But really good time to be buying is now, is my opinion. And we'll see CyberFi and other ones really pick up during those moments because people come in through whatever gateway. Usually it's Bitcoin, but sometimes it's other gateway drugs. Like Dogecoin brought a bunch of people in, and Shiba Inu. But they'll come in, and then they start to get a feel for the crypto community, and they start, they find out about launch pads, and money really flows in through those. Cool. That's all I had to say about CyberFi.
Yeah,
I do like the team. Cool. I've spoken to them. Very sharp people.
Yeah, no, it looks interesting, and it's just not quite ready for me. You could play the range, as I say, but let's look at the next one, which is
this is not it.
Okay, so
Fidira is the token. Now they might not be.
Okay.
FID.
FID. Okay.
Fidira.
So I picked the first one. You see.
Yeah. No, it might not even be in here. It's relatively new.
Okay.
We can check out FID on CoinMarketCap, and we'll pull them up. Or CoinGecko, either one of those.
Oh, hang on. That's just gone straight back there. Let's look at CoinGecko.
Yeah.
Okay. So FID. Yeah, there we go. That's the same one, isn't it?
No.
Down. Oh, okay. Okay. Let's go back.
Fidira.
That one.
Fidira, yes.
Yeah, got ya. Okay. Whoa, right. So that's 24 hours, thankfully. Okay, that's 1 year. That's still looking a little bit like a one-way street, unfortunately. Yeah, that's not really letting up on the downside, but I've got the maximum amount. Oh, that's only from October, so this is just a short-term trend.
Yeah.
It's in a bit of a dive at the moment, and it's very difficult to do much analysis with such short-term price action. So I'd have to really, sorry, but I'd have to really defer to the fundamentals there, because when you've got something that's just going down, it's very difficult to know quite why it might be doing that. Although technically, I'm not looking at the why. I can't really say anything other than it looks bearish, because that's all there is to it in terms of this chart. But there may be something interesting about it that would allow us to buy it. I mean, the only thing I can think of is this psychological 10 cents level. You know, there are certain levels that trigger people to buy, and usually around sort of roundish numbers. So around 10 might encourage a bit of buying there. But I think we'd have to get a bit more on the background as to why it might be down there.
Yeah, so Fidira is one that I like a lot. I've spoken to them. They have a lot of announcements coming. So they did their token launch, and it launched, and they did, I think, a 3 or 4x. If you look at that, so can you pull up your chart again, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
And let me share look at exactly what happens that kind of explains their price drop. So we see that they launched, looks like the 29th of October or maybe the 30th, but
Got
somewhere in there the token came out. So about 30 days later, or just before then, is when this drop happens. That's
There we
because
go.
it was right in anticipation of their probably some more pre-sale and other tokens vesting, meaning the supply was just increased. Because a lot of these projects, when they're new, what they do is they squeeze their market caps really low at first to try to get as much of a pump as possible. Now, Fidira has some huge announcements coming. They're just not ready yet, but they did go ahead and decide to launch. Their token did all right, even though they're sitting on these huge announcements. Essentially, they're putting crypto gift cards in a lot of the major retail outlets around the world, and they already have the distribution set up. They're just waiting on those announcements to be made until their partners are ready to make those announcements. So when they come, this one will do really well. So
That sounds good. That sounds good, because it's so cheap and it's gone one way.
I
So,
know, and it's probably down to IDO price. I don't remember what the IDO price is. What's the price at on it right now? Sitting around, was it around 10 cents?
was that the IDO? Was it?
No, what's a that's my guess on what yeah, sitting around I think IDO price. So
Right, right,
nice.
right.
And if we're
Yeah.
lucky, it'll break through that and go below that a little bit. But I like to buy cheap, right? And so it's hard. It's not often you get to buy below IDO price, but when you do, count your blessings, especially on something that you know has some good announcements coming. They just haven't been made. And these are the type of diamonds in the rough I like to find, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
we partnered with them, and we're doing some giveaways. Once we cross over 25,000 subscribers, we'll be giving away some of their tokens. So it'll be a good opportunity for 5 lucky winners to get some tokens from us that we paid for our winners.
Cool. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on that. That looks good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I like those kind of numbers, right? I like to buy cheap, and sometimes I did get into a lot of IDOs back in March. It's a pain. It's worthwhile pain, especially if you can get a bigger allocation. But I like it when the price comes back down on something I'm interested in, right to IDO price.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's yeah. Yes, it saves you the hassle of doing the IDO before, and you get it at the same price. So I can see psychologically why that might be a nice area to buy. Um, so unless I've got this one wrong, it's Internet
this is right.
Computer. Is that
Yep.
correct? Yeah. So again, this is another interesting one in terms of it's done its downward trend. It's tried to reverse. Um, that should really have extended there. That was a really nice little breakout. Fairly triangular, but not really, a bit more sort of rangy in terms of the breakout. But that was the best chance of it extending. So when it failed there, it failed hard actually. It came back really hard, broke the low, and it's just drifted along, which is okay, because it means that that it's obviously a bit of a sleeping giant. And then it's broken this little consolidation again, and then gone back to what is the biggest support that's on this chart, which is the ultimate low. So this low around 27 is massive. So no wonder we're getting a little bit of buying coming in now, because it's the cheapest, virtually the cheapest it's been, certainly on this chart, and maybe from way before as well. So we're going to see a bounce, but there's some barrier levels for it. So 39, it could struggle to break out through 39, because that is now massive resistance. It's hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 or 6 times. So when it tries to get back through there'd be a lot of people who've bought at these levels that might want to let it go, but they're just short-term traders. And sometimes you've got to think like a short-term trader to see when the long-term trades come in. And the long-term trades will come in when this downward trend line breaks. So if this consolidates here and then breaks upwards, takes out this lower line and this resistance line at the same time, then you've got a much clearer buy signal that could then take us all the way back up to this 84, 85 level. If that breaks, then we'll have a massive double bottom. And then we're in business, because that means this has got a massive base and it's going to go much higher. So we want to see some basing price action, and sometimes the scale of that just gets bigger. But at the moment, there's only a very small kind of bit of evidence that there's some good support, and that's from this, obviously this long-term support. We could buy it here, but for me, that's not enough. Now, perhaps it's got a compelling story that might make you want to sort of get some at this level, but that's a separate issue. So I'd have to hand over to you, Crypto Rain, for that.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up its market cap, because that makes a difference to me. When this came out, a lot of the major crypto channels were covering it, and I refused to, because it was so expensive. And one of the great ways to lose money in crypto is buy it when it's expensive, right? And I like to buy low and sell high, not buy high and sell low. And look how high that was. I mean, it was absolutely gigantic. So when it came out, it was all the way over $500. It was like 600 and something. And so it's done a massive retrace since then. And okay, so now it's 5% of that cost. That's my territory. That's where I get excited. Now, do I know that this one's going to hit it? Its market cap is still like almost $6 billion. So that's a fairly high market cap. And its fully diluted market cap is 14 billion. So it's got about half of its supply in circulation. I'm a lot more interested at this price. I don't know if they're going to hit their story. Like, there's a lot of things that are going to be like the internet computer. Like Ethereum has been billed as the internet computer, though we find out like the transaction speeds and the cost per transaction, once it gets a lot of usage, doesn't really work until maybe they change it. But Cardano could be the internet computer. There's a lot of things that could be it. So it's like, I get that there's a lot of weight behind this one. But why did Microsoft beat out IBM 50 years ago or 40 years ago? IBM had so much more money. They had so much more weight behind them. It's just they weren't as nimble. They couldn't move and adapt as fast. So what's great is the market will pick this winner. Now, at this price, I start to get interested, but I have as much of the blue chips as I want personally. And I definitely put this in the blue chip category. But at this price, I mean, if we go to whether you buy, wait, or sell on this, what would you say? Or when we talk about, remember our whole one-night stand analogy? Would we one-night stand this? Would we run away from this? Or would we marry this one?
I wouldn't marry it yet. But I would say I would wait, personally. I would wait on this one. I want to see a bit more evidence.
Yeah, on me, at this price, if I weren't full on what I've got, this would be, I would marry it for, it might be marry it for 3 months and then file an annulment within that window. But
marry it as part of a harem, maybe?
It wouldn't be a two-night stand or even a 2-week stand. It would be more like a 3 to 6 month stand. I do not want to be holding this through the bear market because I don't know how it'll perform. But I think from here it's got lots of upside.
Interesting. It's interesting that
95% correction, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Now, it could turn into a 98% correction. Then you're like, man, I could have got cheaper. But that's my type of deal right there.
well, if the technology is good, as you say, it's there's not a lot of hype about it because it's fallen so much. So people are just bailing out. If it's got a decent business behind it, then it would look interesting.
We'll see if they do. I haven't looked at the tech behind it. It sure got a lot of coverage, and they have a lot of, there's a lot of people that believe in the tech. I haven't looked at it myself. But at this kind of price, that gets my attention, 95% off. So I can't say I know the technology, but sometimes I make investments, and I don't know the technology, but I do know the narrative that they're in. And that's why I only marry stuff for the really long term that I know the tech behind it and I know what's going on. But sometimes I'll just kind of short term marry something for 3 or 4 months because they're in the right narrative and on the right discount. And that's where this falls in. Let's take a look at our next one.
Yeah. Have I got the right code for that?
Probably not.
Probably not.
MONI, you'll probably find it on CoinGecko.
Okay.
A lot of these ones are going to be shorter. They won't necessarily pull up on the big charts.
Did I jump one, or was that...
Monsta Infinite. That's the one we're looking for.
Okay. It's a cool name. Oh, hello. That looks good. That looks interesting. What's that? That's 24 hours. Okay, so let's get a bit...
Yeah, that's 24.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. There's not a lot of data, unfortunately.
Nope.
So on the 1 year, well, it's not a year chart, is it? It's going back. It's only going back a few months, September. So yeah, it's heading towards the low point of its range psychologically near the $1 mark. And let's just zoom in and see if we get a bit more data. It's only 30 days yet. I mean, it's made a really small inverse head and shoulders pattern, which is like something that you just buy for like a couple of days. So this is a one night stand for me because it could bounce just because of this little head and shoulders pattern.
Yeah.
But there isn't really a whole lot more to say about it other than that, given that the trend has been down and there's not a lot of data. But I'd be really curious to see or to hear what it is and what it does. But again, the more data for me as a technician, because I'm just using price, the better it is. So when you only get a little bit, it's hard to make a call.
Yeah, this is in my buy area for sure on this one. Monsta Infinite is compared to Axie Infinity with some upgrades on the gameplay over Axie Infinity. So in other words, it's kind of like they copied it in some ways, made some improvements. And this happens in video games a lot, where they copy some of the ideas. The characters aren't too different. They are different. But the gameplay has some upgrades to it. And they're still in that early phase of rolling out their gameplay and other things. And also, like, some of their tokens are getting pushed out. So what's hard in the early days when they do it that way, that they squeeze the initial market cap so low, is that it gives it this chance to pump it when it launches, but then it retraces for anywhere from 2 to 6 months to where, because there's just this extra sell pressure. Now, it doesn't take much buy pressure to push past that, but when it's outside the narrative that people aren't talking about it a lot, then usually the sell pressure exceeds the buy pressure and it gets pushed down, and then all of a sudden it reverses. But I'm happy with the price in this range. I picked up a lot of this one, and I'm just holding it for 3 to 5 months till it's being talked on BitBoy's channel. And when I scroll through YouTube and I see like 5 different people talking about it, that's my sell signal. And it's funny how well that works. If you like refuse to buy when everybody's talking about something, and you sell into that, and then but you do know, okay, what are the solid projects that do well, and then you kind of wait till nobody's been talking about them for a while. You look at the price action, you see this nice close to a bottom. Like, I prefer when it's nice and flat and starting to inch up. That's my preferred point. But I do buy sometimes when it's just gone down, and I put some in, and if it does drop some more, I put some more in. And so that's what I like about the price action on this one. So for me, it is Mary.
It's a Mary. Wow.
So I'm going
Okay.
to marry it for 3 to 6 months. They need to
Yeah.
extend annulment periods. I think you have 30 days to file annulment. I need a 6-month annulment window so that, there's no alimony to worry about, no splitting the assets, that type of thing.
Well, I don't mind a one night stand with that. So we'll see how we get on. So the next one is what's Mines of Dalarnia. That's another really cool name. So it's got to be a gaming token, if I'm guessing correctly, unless I've got the wrong one.
No, I think you have exactly the right one. I
Yeah.
don't know this one. I was looking up a little bit beforehand. So I can't add much fundamentally on this, but it is a recent launch one, and I just don't know enough about the gameplay. Now, there are so many different games launching, and just because I don't know it doesn't mean it won't do well.
Yeah.
It's just I'm one person. I can only keep my eyes on so many things, and with how many are launching, I
Yeah.
just couldn't tell you. So I guess all we have to look at is a tiny bit of price action here.
Yeah, and again, with caveat about how much price action we've got to look at, I mean, it is interesting because in a very short space of time, you've had an upward trend, then you've had what's called a head and shoulders reversal, which is quite a big reversal pattern. So you've got this left shoulder, this is the head, and this is the right shoulder. So this has created the sell signal, which would have been at 280. So 280 is your barrier. It needs to get over 280, and also it needs to break this downward trend line as well. So if we put in the trend line from here, which sits over all the price action, excuse me, again, those are the two lines. So it needs to break this resistance for it to look good. And it needs to break this downward trend. Now, there is one other interesting thing that's going on here, and that is this could be another inverse head and shoulders, and that's usually the sign of a base. But because there's not much price action, I can't really be that strong on it. But I wouldn't mind having a punt on this to the upside, just again for like a one night stand, see if we can get it through this resistance point. But then I'd have to wait to see whether it takes out this 280, which I think it will, because the chart doesn't look terrible. It looks like there's some buying going on, and there's some really good support down here around 185, is that? 187 to 185. So some good support below. So obviously if it comes back down again, buying should emerge, and if it doesn't, that would be a bit of a bad sign. But there's some momentum that if it can just take out a resistance point that's fairly close, then it will look good. So yeah, I'd go with a one night stand on that.
Yeah. What's interesting is it seems to have launched a month ago, at least by Coin Market Cap. It started being tracked a month ago. So I don't know what the vesting is like on this one, but 1 month ago, if it were on the monthly vesting, now sometimes they don't, they put a cliff, meaning no tokens will unlock to their pre-sale investors for an extra month or 3 months. Like they might give an initial out to some of their pre-sale investors, but then start dropping it after this cliff. And so it doesn't look like there was any vesting going on, or we would have seen another big dump today. So, yeah, it might be a good one night stand with. But for me, I'm just going to wait completely on this. I'm just going to run away till I understand what's going on with the price action.
That's totally fair enough, isn't it? If you don't really know the technology, you can't really analyze it. So yeah.
Yeah, so for me, it's a runaway for now until I know it better. I reassess the danger. And, there might be a great upside too. I just don't have a good feel for it on this one.
Yeah. So this is the Umbrella Network.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have covered this before, and I think we talked about the breakout when it was up here. Again, this is one where it came back for a retracement, and this is why these retracement levels are actually so important, because they need to hold. And this one didn't, and it traded around it, but it still couldn't break out of this decline, this downward trend, which I think longer term is it will break and it will go back up. It's just been a really smooth move downwards, which is a bit of a shame because I think this had looked so good. I was a bit more bullish on it. But yeah, I'm gonna have to say that the main low, if this is a really good technology, if you get a chance to buy it down at 0.02, 20 cents, then that is a really solid takeoff level, because that's where it you can see where the price action, when it hit it, it just went flying. So very short term, we've got what's called a spike reversal. You see how it's gone down and the candle's reversed up. Now it's not massive. I prefer that to be a big shakeout, and then a reversal, which tells me that there's been what's called capitulation, which means that people have just gone, oh, I can't take it anymore, I'm going to sell. And then everyone sells, but there's some, people waiting in the wings going, if it gets down there, I'm just going to hoover this up. And they do, and it bounces all the way back up. So a bit of that's happened, but not in a massive scale. So that is a positive sign. So that means there's been a bit of a clear out, and there's, the upward trend can start. But really the trend rate is here, and it's accelerated slightly, which is a bit of a disappointment short term. But I think longer term, this will break back up. You can see, so the trend rate was like this, then it's gone a bit more aggressive. So if it can get through this line, and then the next resistance would be, psychological at 50 cents, then that's game back on. But for the moment, I'm going to be waiting.
Yeah, I love this one for a longer term hold. I'm going to be waiting too, just because the chart is screaming at me it's going to go a little bit cheaper. We made a lot on this one in our audience, because we addressed it when it was like 25 to 30 cents before it did that run all the way to 90 cents. So congratulations to all of you who did your research and liked it and bought it, and hopefully took some good profits on the way up, because you made out great, because it's barely now returning to the buy area that we covered it at before. And so if you sold it anywhere up in that trajectory all the way to 90 cents, you did really, really well. And this is why we take profits when we're ahead, and at least take our initial out, because you don't know if this is going to happen. Now, this has got a strong fundamental, like on me personally, I like the fundamentals behind the team. They're a competitor to Chainlink. Their market cap is a fraction compared to Chainlink, yet the technology behind Umbrella is able to do the same thing but faster than Chainlink can, and more data feeds at the same time. And so it's an upgraded technology. So I think it can do a lot better than where it's at. So that the only reason I'm going to hold on it is because I love it. I would marry this one for a 6-month period, maybe longer, but it looks like it's about to get cheaper. So
is there any fundamental reason why it might be going down like that, other than just investors taking profit or something like that?
Well, so it's in the DeFi narrative. It's an oracle, and nothing in the DeFi narrative, or almost nothing in the DeFi narrative, is really pumping right now. So had a lot of news that it hit some news items and some big announcements, and that's what caused it to pump all the way up. But then it's just like no news. And in the crypto space, it's funny how short everyone's memory is. Literally, if you have a memory in the space, you can do well. And remembering when things are strong, but they're out of cycle and out of narrative. And that's when you're buying. So this is what I like to look at. I mean, a lot of things are on sale. I especially like the things out of narrative that are on sale that will come into the narrative. And the DeFi narrative is a strong narrative. It's going to pump tremendously. Our sponsors, OneChain, are in there, that in the DeFi narrative, and when it hits, it'll hit huge. And our audience will be absolutely rich because of the DeFi narrative. So that's exciting. But it's not happening now, and that's okay. I'm patient like that, and patience pays huge.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about that, if the whole sector's under pressure, then it means that there's not a particular problem with that technology. It's just the sector's under a bit of a cloud, but that will lift, and then the stronger ones will take the trend higher. So, and it's just a question of rotation. So we just need to be a bit more patient. So this final one, CityStates, again this is a really interesting chart because of how it likes to trade quite cleanly from a technical point of view. Now, again, there's not much data, but I do like the way when it's traded up, it's given some really nice signals. and this would these big green candles would be the ones that I would get excited about. But there was some evidence before this broke out that this was going to happen. So it seems to trade technically. There was a double top there that was a sell signal, came back in to close to where it had broken out from, and now we've got potentially this could be a bigger double top. It needs to hold above this 0.0117 level. That really is crucial. So at the very least, it's going sideways, but that support level is so key. If it breaks that, I'd be a bit worried that it's going to trend back downwards. We could look at the 50% retracement point as a buy point, but just watch out if that level breaks. Now, it can stay in this range for a bit, but because these highs have been getting lower, I'm just a bit concerned that it might actually try and nudge through this in the next week or two. But again, it's a daily bar chart, so there's not much we can say about it. Especially, if this does shake it off, if it shakes this range off and starts to trend up, if it's going to go a long way, this would just look like a little flat correction as it goes all the way up to, say, 10 cents. So we've got to put that into context. When you're talking about not much data, everything gets magnified. So what I would like to see happen is this 0.02 level, which is the center of this retracement, breach, and then we can start talking about it taking the high out. And for me, I'd need that high to be taken out because this is to be bullish, because this looks so much like a potential bigger topping formation. But it's interesting that it's still up here, whereas other markets, other coins are on a downward trend. So that's the one positive about it. It's just we can't ignore this potential, what would be a big double top or a big M shape. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I say, with the daily chart, it could happen tomorrow for all we know. So we need to see a bit more data.
Yeah, for me, this is a run away for now. Like, it's not that it doesn't seem like a good project. It's a video game. And these smaller video games that have like some economics behind it and stuff can do well, but it's already pumped tremendously. And Mark Zuckerberg really pushed the whole metaverse thought into people's minds. And it causes this psychological boom early, right? But it's kind of like taking an energy drink or eating a bunch of sugar. You come off that high, and what I'm worried about is that some of these gaming projects that the price has gone way up, and some of the metaverse projects that they're going to come off that high. So that's just my concern on this. I'm just going to wait or run away at this price, because I am concerned that's a head and shoulders pattern and it's going to retrace. I don't know what their vesting's like, but imagine that 10% of their tokens are vesting every month. And so as kind of the narrative shifts to something else, say it goes to DeFi and it shifts away from games, and then so you're not having a lot of buy pressure, you're having a little bit of people getting their tokens, they're just turning around selling them right away, so you got some sell pressure, then the price just comes down, gets more attractive, and that's what we're all about here, right? So buy low, sell high, right? Not buy high and then freak out and sell low. That doesn't work. That's why so many people leave the crypto space during the crypto winter, is they buy high and then they end up panic selling out, and then they're done and they're out, and then they come back like 4 years later when things are at highs again. Don't be that guy.
Yeah, so I put up a chart of Mana because last week, I think it was, or it may have been the week before, I can't remember, but it probably was last week. I was saying that this chart looked good and it should have continued higher, and you were saying that you thought it was time to get out. Now, you were right. Short term, that was absolutely bang on. It did go a little higher from, I think, this bar, which is where we were looking at it. It went one more bar up, but then it turned. So it's interesting how the market was near a top. My view is that when I'm looking at this, I'm going to hold it for years. So I'm expecting this to be, in favor and start to maybe fly perhaps after the middle of next year, if not before. But that's not the point. The point was that what was the price action looking like at the time? And, sometimes your instincts, you got to listen to them, and your instincts were spot on. So, good call.
Yeah, I just like, when I've seen this trend now twice when a billionaire comes in and makes waves in the space. A lot of the big pump we had in March was because of Elon Musk. And he's a person that had more social financial credibility than any other one person in the world because of how well Tesla stock had been doing. And he is a bit of a genius. And so it pushed the space way high, and then it came down from that sugar high. So that's my concern with this. A lot of these decentralized worlds, like Decentraland, and a lot of these metaverses are going to take 5 years really to be ready. So the next wave, they'll be really big. That doesn't mean there isn't money to be made. I still think we have a big pump. But what if, because we got this big shock to the system caused by Mark Zuckerberg, that it takes off, which we saw, and then it comes down, and then sometime, like, then the narrative shifts to something else, and it might be DeFi, it might be something else, and then it comes back to metaverses before the end of this bull market, and say that happens in April, and then we see a big pump, but between now and then we see a big cooling on some of these. And so I just don't want to be holding those during the cooling. I want to buy things that are already cheap, not ones that have already done 20x. So they could go more. I don't know. It's just kind of like standing on thin ice, hoping you don't break through, in my opinion, or how I think about it. Could we take a look at one more that I want to throw in here? And that is Ultra. UOS is the ticker symbol.
UOS.
Yes. Now, this one's not as cheap. Now, I covered this a lot when it was cheap, and I hope my audience liked it when I covered a lot during the summer. And yeah, it is. Yeah. Ultra is like a decentralized Steam, and I'll be covering this in our live stream. So if you didn't catch the live stream, what we're filming now will be airing on Thursday. The live stream on Wednesday, one of the ones I'm going to be covering is Ultra, because I think this is one of the projects that 20 years from now is still going to be around. They're going to be a heck of a lot higher than where they are now. So even though it's done this big pump already, it has done this nice retracement. But if I'm right on this, and they're around 20 years from now, and they're a dominant factor in the narrative that they're in, boy, it'll be crazy to see where the price will be on this 20 years from now.
Yeah, so very short term, we're generally trending up, and the trend rate has accelerated here. So it's pulling back from a very sharp acceleration of trend, which is lovely, but generally unsustainable, especially when the rest of the market is falling. So it's come back into a support zone, which is around 140, and it's being bought up there. So we are now seeing some buying coming in, but of course there's a lot of nervousness around the sector in general. So can it really go back into another trend like this? Possibly not. I think it needs to consolidate a bit more, but broadly speaking, the trend is up, so that's really good. Now, the main sell trigger that set this off on the downward path was this double top, and that triggered at this point here at 184, around 184. So that for me is the crossover point. If it gets and closes over 184, if it does it on a 1 week basis, that's really good. But ultimately, I want to see that level taken out, because it'll tell me any technical trade that sold it there will then be covered, and it would start to push it back up again. But overall, it looks interesting. I mean, it got a little out of step with the rest of the chart. Got a bit overexcited, but it's come back into a decent support area, so I can see why it's being bought. So I think that's a buy. And I dare say if it comes back and closes below this 133, then I'd have to say I would probably get out and then try and buy it cheaper if I was trading. But as an investment, if I was to buy it and shut my eyes and look at it in a few months' time, I wouldn't be that worried about it.
Yeah, personally, I hope that this is going to get cheaper. I do think it's going to get a lot more expensive over 20 years, but in the short term, I think it's going to get cheaper, just because I just have this feeling that December is going to be bloody, and half of January, and then we're going to start on a bigger uptrend, and maybe I'm wrong on that. But I think our big leg up that we are looking for is going to happen like February, March, April, May. Maybe if we're lucky, it continues into June. And so that means December is probably going to come down from this gaming metaverse high that's happened, kind of like eating a sugar candy bar. Then it's going to impact you, and like later, like after sugar wears off, it just kind of comes down, and people will be kind of depressed, and they'll get shaken out of the market, and we're going to let that happen to other people, not us, right? Like I'm happy when I see prices like this. I mean, on an emotional level, it still impacts me, but then I'm like, sweet, everything is on sale, and if I say my bags are full, I have no available cash to put in, that's all right. Then I'm just patient, and that's what's made me millions of dollars through crypto, is just that viewpoint, right? Because I've been through this cycle so many different times now, and it's just part of the game. Now, a lot of people take their ball and they go home and they leave the game. The people that I know that have stuck around for the long term and buy when it gets cheap, they're all millionaires now.
So
just over the past 4 to 6 years.
It's a good time to do a bit of research as well. When things go quiet, there's so many technologies. It's, as I say, a good time to kind of take a step back and look around. And you don't have to make decisions so fast when everything's flying, because you always feel like you're chasing the market. But if we do have a month or two of a consolidation, I don't think it would be such a bad thing. But it will be a launch pad of some kind, and there is a big move coming, that's for sure.
Yes, that's so exciting. So if you in the audience are ready to level up your crypto game and are looking for life-changing gains, or even getting that $850,000 Lambo that will increase in value rather than the $250,000 ones that decrease in value, join the Rainmaker family through subscribing as we get into how to analyze projects in ways that turn my portfolio from thousands to millions, and the system I use to think about crypto that will help keep emotions in check. We want to thank Paul for joining us. Thank you for your time. Big thanks to Definity for loaning you to us. So we really appreciate your contrary approach to things, so that my audience can get different opinions and different thoughts, so that they can become the most informed audience over time, because we suspect that'll turn into the wealthiest audience over time. All right, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
To know that nothing comes easy, but with knowledge to gain. Show sticking out this road could soon become a bear market. We're learning and growing, and when it's slow, will be the target. They say it's come out, Bitcoin is dead. The massive decreases can get to your head. Sticking around, the time is better. I'm strong like that, I'll let the others be fretters. 2 years time, the bull will bring back the gains. That makes it worth the effort, cause here comes the rain. So let's go Rainmakers, let's make it all happen. Let go of the hate, let the haters be crappy. I'm here for 5 years, let's do this together. The time is right, the time could be better. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a Rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes it time fly by, years going so fast. This game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a Rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Haters be hating, but time to slow down. Addressing what they say when I'm wearing my crown. They're chasing green candles like someone who was new. I got a vision that was bigger, helping me to push through. I'm still human and sometimes it is rough, and that's what makes me special, simply I stay tough. Cause I'm a Rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not rely